In a room full of noise, silence becomes a power move, because silence isn't absence, it's presence, unspoken, controlled, and unforgettable. In a world addicted to overexposure, people speak fast, react faster, and fill every second with opinions, defenses, noise. Everyone is trying to be heard, to be seen, to assert their worth. But the one who doesn't rush to speak, the one who waits, watches, holds still, that's the person everyone pays attention to without realizing it. Because silence is unsettling. It interrupts the script, it doesn't play along. And when you don't give people the reaction they expect, you force them to sit in their own noise. That's where the fear starts. People fear what they can't read, what they can't decode, and nothing is harder to interpret than silence, especially when it's calm, steady, intentional. That's when silence becomes power, not weakness, not passivity, power. Because silence says, I'm not here to perform, I'm not here to prove, I'm here to observe. And when you're the one observing, you hold the upper hand. You listen deeper. You move wiser. You strike when it matters, not when it's loud. In negotiation, in conflict, in leadership, silence commands attention. The loudest person in the room may dominate the moment, but the silent one defines the atmosphere, because silence creates space, and space makes people nervous. Nervous enough to reveal themselves, talk too much, fill the gap, expose insecurity. People underestimate how strategic silence can be. They think staying quiet means you have nothing to say, but silence often means you have too much to say, and you're deciding what's actually worth saying. That's a different kind of strength, a disciplined one, a dangerous one, because in silence you're not reacting, you're choosing. You're not being pulled by ego. You're centered in awareness, and awareness is power. It sees through masks. It hears what's not said. It knows when to engage and when to let the noise burn itself out. Silence makes people question themselves. Did I say too much? Are they judging me? What are they thinking? And in that uncertainty, your silence becomes influence. It shifts the energy, not by force, but by presence. People lean in to understand you. They overthink around you. They fill in blanks with their own fear. And all the while you remain still, not out of weakness, but out of mastery. That's the thing they don't teach you. Silence, when chosen, is an active tool. It's not the same as being voiceless. It's choosing when to use your voice with precision, because anyone can speak, but not everyone can stay silent and still own the moment. That takes self-control. That takes self-worth. That takes someone who isn't desperate to be validated, and that's rare. That's why it's feared. Because a silent person who knows their worth is a threat to every manipulator, every show-off, every fake authority in the room. Silence doesn't play by their rules, and that's what makes it so powerful. Silence makes you unreadable, and unreadable people are dangerous, because when someone can't read you, they can't control you, they can't predict your next move, they can't manipulate your emotions. And in a world where so many people survive by controlling the reactions of others, nothing is more threatening than someone who doesn't react at all. Silence disrupts the game. It breaks the pattern. It takes the power away from those who rely on pressure, on urgency, on provocation. Because the truth is, most people don't know how to handle someone who simply watches, who hears the insult and smiles, who listens to the chaos and says nothing. It's not indifference, it's restraint. It's the ability to sit with discomfort without needing to shift it, to hold tension without exploding, and that's terrifying to those who live off emotional chaos. When you're silent, people can't tell if you're hurt, angry, calm, or calculating. And in that ambiguity, they become insecure. Because power loves clarity. Power loves knowing what makes you tick. When you're silent, you strip them of that weapon. You become unreachable. And the unreachable can't be broken. Think about the great leaders, The most feared strategists, the ones people can't forget. They weren't loud. They were precise. They spoke when the moment demanded it. And when they didn't speak, the silence itself said something. That's the difference. Loud people seek attention. Silent people command it, not through volume, but through presence. And presence is magnetic when it's grounded, when it's still, when it doesn't ask, but chooses. When you walk into a room and say nothing, but everyone feels your energy. That's not emptiness. That's presence. And that presence is powerful because it doesn't give anything away. You control what's revealed. You choose what they see. And the rest, you keep it guarded, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Because you've learned that the more people know, the more they assume, twist, weaponize. So you've chosen silence not as retreat, but as strategy. That's what makes it so rare, so dangerous, because people don't know how to defend against what they can't understand. And silence, real silence, intentional silence, is one of the most misunderstood weapons there is. It doesn't lash out. It doesn't need approval. It simply waits. And in that waiting, it gains leverage, because people will always reveal more than they mean to when they're trying to fill a void. And silence creates that void. On purpose, it invites the truth out. It exposes hidden motives. It shines light on pressure points, not by force, just by not moving, not reacting, not giving what they're trying to provoke. That's where fear is born, in the gap between what they expect from you and what you withhold. And in that gap, you win, because you hold the one thing they can't touch, your center, untouched, unshaken, unreadable. The most powerful people don't speak to be heard. They speak to shift the room. They don't raise their voice to demand attention. They use silence to earn it. Every word they say has weight because they speak so little, so deliberately, so precisely. Their voice isn't noise, it's a signal that breaks through chaos, a signal that lands, because they've built a reputation around restraint. So when they finally choose to speak, people listen, not out of obligation, but because the silence before it made space for their words to matter. That's how real influence works, not through volume, but through gravity. Weak leaders talk constantly. They chase approval. They flood the space with justification, commands, over-explaining. But the real ones, they sit back, they observe, they gather the room before they say a thing. And when they do speak, it's like dropping a stone in still water. Everything ripples. That's not charisma, that's discipline. It's knowing that not everything deserves a reaction. Not every challenge needs a comeback. Not every attack requires defense. Because when you know who you are, you no longer speak to prove it. You speak only to shift it, to reframe the moment, to redirect energy, to bring people back to center. That's why your words should be rare, not absent, but measured. Because when people never know when you'll speak, they learn to pay attention when you do. That's the art of silence. It makes every word valuable, every pause intentional, every moment calculated. And that kind of communication, it's not casual, it's commanding. It doesn't perform, it transforms. You become someone who doesn't speak unless it moves the needle, unless it reveals truth, unless it creates shift. And that terrifies people who rely on reaction, because when they can't control when or how you speak, they feel powerless. They know they can't trap you in emotional chaos. They can't bait you into arguments. Because you don't speak on impulse, you speak on purpose. That purpose is power. That purpose is rare. And rare things are respected. That's why powerful people say so little. Because the less you speak, the more people reflect. The less you explain, the more people observe. The less you defend, the more people listen. And in a world drowning in noise, the one who speaks with precision becomes unforgettable. Not because they forced the moment, but because they moved it with clarity, with calm, with weight. That's the kind of presence you build in silence, the kind that doesn't need to shout, the kind that walks in and changes the temperature without saying a word. True silence is not avoidance, it's dominance through emotional control, because silence, when chosen deliberately, is never passive. It is the highest form of self-command. Most people confuse silence with fear, with weakness, with a lack of things to say. But real silence, the kind that holds power, is built on the ability to remain unmoved in the face of pressure. It is the discipline to not react when reaction is expected. It is the strength to hold your ground without needing to prove your ground exists. And that makes people uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable, because emotional control is the one trait that makes you untouchable. When you're not pulled by provocation, when your mood isn't owned by other people's words, when you don't give your emotional temperature away with every raised voice, that's when you begin to dominate the dynamic, not by force, but by refusal to be shaken, by choosing to stay rooted while the room spins. You see, power isn't loud, power is composed. Power doesn't flinch, and silence, strategic silence, is the clearest signal that you're no longer playing on their frequency. You're not avoiding the fight. You're denying them the satisfaction of drawing you into their chaos. And that's what real dominance is, the refusal to operate on other people's terms. It's not controlling others, it's mastering yourself. Because when you master yourself, you stop being predictable. You stop being manipulatable. You become a presence, not a pawn. People won't know what you're thinking. They won't know how to twist you. And in that confusion, they begin to fear. Not because you threatened them, but because they lost their ability to move you. That's terrifying to anyone who thrives off control, because emotional volatility is what most people rely on to get what they want. They poke, they provoke, they push buttons, and when you don't respond the way they expect, when you stay quiet, calm, centered, they lose power. Because now, they're no longer leading, you are. That's the real meaning of dominance. It's not dominance over others. It's dominance over your own inner landscape, your mind, your triggers, your rhythm. And when you own that, no one owns you. That's why silence is feared. It signals that you've stepped out of their narrative, that you've stopped playing the emotional ping-pong game, that you now move only when it's strategic. That kind of stillness isn't passivity, it's power. It's what makes lions lie in silence while others bark. It's what makes the strongest chess players pause when the board is loud. They don't panic, they calculate, and then they move, once, and end the game. That's the kind of silence you want, one born from emotional clarity, one grounded in self-control, one that doesn't suppress feeling but masters its expression. Because once you control your inner storm, no outside force can shake you, and that is terrifying to anyone who thought they could. When you stop speaking to be understood and start using silence to be respected, you evolve into a different kind of force. Not loud, not boastful, but magnetic. You begin to realize that your voice was never the power, your presence was. You begin to understand that the real currency in any room isn't how much you say, it's how much you don't need to say, because silence, when intentional, builds mystery, and mystery builds authority. People don't fear what's explained, they fear what's unpredictable, and silence creates that unpredictability. It strips you of desperation, of the need to over-clarify, of the need to be understood by people who've already decided what they want to believe. And in that moment, when you stop chasing understanding, you step into influence. You don't talk to fill space. You speak only when you want to shift it. You don't respond to control the room. You stay still and become the room. That's what silence gives you, sovereignty. Not in a cold, disconnected way, but in a grounded, intentional way. You know your worth. You know your mind. You no longer offer emotional access to anyone who demands it. You become a gatekeeper of your own energy, and that scares people because now they need permission to reach you. Now they have to earn your attention. And attention in this age is power, because everyone is screaming, everyone is drowning in noise, but the one who can stay still and be heard anyway, that's the one who changes the game. That's the one who lives above the chaos. You're no longer explaining your silence, you're wielding it as a filter, as a force, as a message, because silence used well says everything. It says, I'm not here to perform, I'm not here to beg, I'm not here to convince. It says, I see through you, and I choose peace over participation. And that peace, that ability to walk through noise untouched, that's power, that's leadership, that's emotional evolution. So yes, stay silent when silence is power. Speak when truth needs a voice. But never again feel the need to over-explain your worth. You are not dangerous because you're loud. You're dangerous because you're clear, because your silence has meaning, because your restraint has rhythm, because your energy no longer leaks. It commands, and that in the end is why they fear you. Not because you make noise, but because you've mastered the art of not needing to.